Well, my name's Emer Walsh. I'm an artist from Longford, and I'm going to be representing Ireland in the Venice Biennale in 2024. A lot of the work that I do is preoccupied with the connection between the land contestation in the 19th century in Ireland and how that links to today, the contemporary moment, in particular the crisis in Ireland around housing and land. So in the late 19th century, you get a lot of kind of very revolutionary ideas emerging. A significant amount of reform happens in Ireland, first under British rule and then within the Republic. In the 19th century, they talk about the fall of landlordism. But when you look at the present moment in Ireland, you can see that landlordism is alive and well and is, an acute crisis in Ireland, but is also a global crisis. And then there's a particular kind of history of a part of the built environment that I'm looking at in particular for this work for Venice, which is the history of using earth as a building material. In Ireland, we have a vernacular version of this, that's cob, which is when you make a combination of clay, straw and sand. And you can still see some examples of cob houses in Ireland today. But I suppose, as well as being a kind of local history, earth, building with earth as a material is used globally, and there's different versions of it that use different combinations of materials. I suppose the thing they all have in common is they use the material that is most closely available. It's the land, oftentimes beside where the building is being built. And the other thing about that, the history of using earth as a building material, is that it's also a very ancient practice. So you get remains of earth buildings, particularly in the Eastern Mediterranean, that are over 11,000 years old, in Palestine and Turkey. And something that I suppose is particularly interesting about those buildings to me is they were made by people who are not yet settled, so they're not yet agricultural. So you have massive sort of collective building projects that involve vast quantities of labour and material for people who are nomadic, but who obviously see a value in creating sort of collective architecture. The demand that working with this kind of material makes is part of what's really interesting about it to me. Is it's very cheap, it's freely available, and it's locally available, but it requires huge amounts of labour to make it workable as a building material. One of the reasons why it's tricky to say, because I was kind of thinking about my future housing situation, and the issue is like, when can you get 12 friends to take 3 months off work or whatever it takes? You can't kind of like look at this material without seeing a history that is both local and global and ancient, but that also reveals something about labour, time, capitalism, community, like how we're able to come together to build for each other. So today we just wrapped filming the video element of the work at Venice. And this involved 7 performers, including myself, set on a building site with cob as our material. And what I was kind of interested in showing was that, building together and working together and community, we can kind of like idealise it and simplify it. But I wanted to show it as a sort of very complex process that involves contestation as much as harmony. So there's like a lot of moments of cooperation and collaboration, and as many moments of like difference and contest. It was very very physical performance because it involved both building and fighting. From the neck down, the costumes sort of represent different sort of periodizations. So you have a pair of people from the late 19th century, a pair from the early 20th century, a pair from the late 20th century, and I appear as a sort of contemporary person. And I suppose kind of what I was trying to represent with them was something like what the kind of person that's thought about in relation to like ordinariness and decency, because I think the way that we use the term like ordinary, decent, it's a kind of very particular sort of, can have good intentions, but politically I think it can end up being it can be a sort of barrier to thinking about who's kind of deserving of rights or being recognised as a subject. And then from the neck up, the performers are wearing latex, olive green latex masks, which push the characters in almost the opposite direction, which figures, you know, for one thing perversity, for another thing sort of criminality, maybe a suggestion of sort of forced clandestinization, but then also over time, because all of the figures are wearing these masks, it also kind of starts to suggest some kind of like alien other sort of so I think the kind of styling is kind of pushing in two directions at the same time, that I think is hopefully doing something kind of interesting. The work for Venice is kind of in three parts. There's an opera work that I've written the libretto for and that Amanda Feary is composing right now, which I'm very, very excited about. There's a video work that we've just finished shooting, and that will be a multiple monitor based video work. And then there's a sculptural installation element of the work, which will be in all of these elements will be in the Arsenale space in Venice. So with this work for Venice, it's opera, sculpture and multi-channel video, all kind of pressing against each other. In the same way as the performers are kind of operating in different periodizations, I'm also thinking about these different materials, because the sculpture is ruin-like, so it kind of is like the afterlife of a building, and the video is talking about a building site, which is kind of the before time of a building, or the sort of like the optimism of building, because with building you're kind of imagining that somebody will be there to inhabit it and use it. And then in the opera work, it's about eviction, which is there's a lot of discussion in the libretto about how the evicting of a person from their home is also the ending of the life or the purpose of that home, because they maintain the building in the same way as the building maintains them. So there is kind of each element of the installation in Venice will sort of speak across time towards each other. Also, the video work involves a certain amount of time travel, because you have all these figures from different periods in Irish history who meet in one place, and on certain things and on certain moments they kind of get along and they're in tune with each other, and then there's kind of ruptures and disagreements and sort of very like very explosive moments of objection between them. Yeah, I think the work is about it's about history, the way that history is storytelling. And I think, I suppose as well, like you know, I'd be very interested in what's called like local history, or even like family history or queer history. But I suppose like the more you look at it, the more you realise that like all history is local history, all history is family history. You know, even if it's happening in the parliament or in the city, a lot of the sort of like the land wars in the late 19th century, a lot of the sort of activity took place rurally, but I suppose it was like a combination of what was happening in the Parliament in the UK under British rule, and then also in like Mayo and in Clare and in towns and villages, the way that people are organising themselves. So I suppose what gets categorised as history with like a qualifier before it is always like very of interest to me. The other thing with history, I suppose, like coming from the queer perspective, there's always the notion in the back of your mind about erasure, like what gets left behind in the moment and what gets abandoned in the future. What stories kind of have to be like let go of or can never be told. The way that we shot the work this week is a way that I really like to work, where the distinction between director, performer and videographer is switching and blurring. And one of the things that facilitates that for me is filming on phones, because there's no barrier to having anybody be the videographer. So it's often a thing where kind of one person's performing, the other person's filming, then you hand the phone over and you do your bit. It was filmed on 4 different phones that 7 performers were kind of tossing between each other, and just even actually the activity of passing the camera around, it starts people instinctively knowing how to like direct. Gets you thinking a little bit differently about how you perform as well, because you're seeing it from both sides and you're able to imagine it together. So it was really a collective filming experience, with a lot of swapping of roles, a really terrific cast of people who work in dance, performance, artists, and yeah, a real pleasure to get to work with a bigger group of people because of the occasion of getting to make this work for Ireland at Venice.